British Ambassador to Ukraine, His Excellency Mr. Simon Smith. Please.
I think it's a bit hot in here, isn't it? Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess this is the time when 1 minute saying meaningless things so that they can fix the microphones, see that everything's working and so on. So that's the end of the meaningless stuff. The next thing I'd like to say before getting down to other substance, obviously, is just to congratulate everybody on International Women's Day. My special congratulations and salute to the women of Ukraine, to the women of the Maidan, to the women of the British Embassy, who are a great team that I'm proud to work with, and last but very much not least, to my wonderful wife and my wonderful two daughters. So that's International Women's Day. We're here to talk about the situation in Ukraine, and I can talk to you on the basis of having less than 1 week ago introduced my foreign minister to members of the new government here, the new administration, and that for him was in turn a very useful and essential preparation, I think, for the British government's input into the special meeting of European Union heads of state and government that happened on Thursday. And our government went into that meeting with two very substantial objectives and, in a sense, two very substantial strands of work. The first strand was to ensure that Prime Minister Yatsenyuk came away from Brussels with the strongest possible signal of support from the European Union heads of state and government. And that statement of support was something that included not just words but actions, and that he was able to come away from Brussels assured that the European Union and its member states were ready with support, not just political, but financial, technical, budgetary, and so on. So part one, the package of support to the administration in Ukraine. Part two was a package of measures and a number of signals to the Russian Federation against the background of its actions in violation of international law in Crimea. And again, the British government was very keen that the European Union should send a strong signal to the Russian Federation that encouraged it to engage immediately in dialogue, engage immediately in a constructive diplomatic effort to resolve the situation that pertains in Crimea at the moment. And it signaled that it was already taking the first measures to demonstrate the European Union's dismay and opposition to the moves that had been taken by the Russian Federation in Crimea, and it demonstrated that in the event that Russia did not take action to de-escalate the situation in Crimea, that the European Union would be prepared to move on progressively to take further measures both to discourage further destabilization and to encourage the engagement in a constructive and diplomatic effort to resolve the situation. And it further signaled that it was incumbent upon Russia not only to take actions to de-escalate the situation, but that there would be serious consequences if there were further actions that were taken to deepen the degree of destabilization which had happened in Crimea. And I think that just to sum up, it's very clear in terms of the position of the British government, very clear in the positions that my Prime Minister and Foreign Minister have put on record in the last few days. This is an issue which is right at the top of the British government's political agenda. It's an issue that matters immensely to us. It matters because we are deeply concerned at violations of international law and the kind of precedent that that sets. We are also very cognizant that there is here in Ukraine a new opportunity, an opportunity to build a new unified Ukraine, and we very strongly believe that this is a moment where Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity needs to be enhanced and supported and not threatened. So you will have seen the results of the European Council meeting on Thursday. Though that was an outcome to which the British government put a great deal of effort to ensure that there were robust outcomes on both the counts that I've mentioned, both the package of support to the new Ukrainian administration and the signaling of readiness to show to the Russian Federation that there are costs and consequences of the actions that they have taken. And just to finish up with a few observations on the Russian actions in Crimea, as my colleague in New York on the Security Council has made clear, we are dismayed and shocked and very much condemn the actions that have been taken in terms of their violation of international law, in terms of an action taken on the basis of entirely spurious reasoning. We recall that there have been no attested incidents of threats to the Russian-speaking community in Crimea. We observe a number of moves to establish again on illegal grounds a process for holding a referendum in Crimea. We regard that as something, as a whole process full of legal unsoundness. And we think again that is an initiative which has only brought further destabilization to the situation. There is very clearly, in our view, an opportunity and a necessity to talk now constructively and with constructive diplomatic engagement about the future of Crimea, about the future of Ukraine, about the future of relations between the European Union and Russia, the European Union and Ukraine. But we're absolutely convinced that those conversations have to happen in a constructive and diplomatic framework, and that the effort to destabilize in contravention of international law is not a constructive input, is not helping us to get to what we think is a perfectly achievable future looking ahead, a future in which the economic and political development of our broad European area can be achieved in such a way that it is good for Ukraine, good for the European Union, good for Russia, and good for the world in general. We think that opportunity exists. We don't think the opportunities are being successfully taken at the moment, and we will continue to pitch in our diplomatic effort and to pitch in our political effort to ensure that there is an improvement in the way in which all parties are engaging in taking that future ahead. But just as a last word, and again just to repeat that it was very much the purpose of my foreign minister's visit here last weekend to send some very powerful signals of support to the new administration. He met acting President Turchinov, he met Prime Minister Yatsenyuk and other members of the government. He also spoke to quite a wide spectrum of people active politically here in Ukraine, and his message was not simply to say we will very much support a government that looks again at some of the fundamental issues that have handicapped the development of Ukraine in the 22 years of its independence, the issues which have held Ukraine back from fulfilling its potential as a successful economy and as a country that brings success and prosperity to all its citizens. We would put a very, very strong emphasis on the need for the new administration to get serious about tackling corruption, to get serious about establishing the rule of law in ways that have not been successfully done in the years since independence so far, and we have made very clear that we will support those efforts as fully as we can. We also made clear in talking to members of the administration that we heard their message of the intent to build a strong Ukraine and a strong unified Ukraine. And we also encourage the new administration to mean what they say when they talk about building a strong and united Ukraine, to set out good, strong policies, not only policies that will, for example, encourage the International Monetary Fund to come in with quick support for good policies in the government, but policies that will reach out to all Ukrainians and will inspire them to join in this project of building a new Ukraine and building one Ukraine. That's the end of the sort of introductory remarks that I'd like to make at this stage, and I'm happy to take any further questions that might be on your minds. Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, the new interim Ukrainian government faces an immediate and imminent challenge, the threat by the Russian Gazprom to cut supplies. How can you help? And secondly, the package, the financial package agreed by the European Council of Ministers, when will the Ukrainian government see the first installment of this package, and what are the conditions?
Well, to answer the second question first, I mean, I think that it's been clear for a long time in the European Union's negotiations and in its interface with previous Ukrainian administrations that a lot of the substantial financial resource which the European Union can commit, in particular to reforms in Ukraine, is dependent on and can only logically go hand in hand with an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. So I think you will find that the International Monetary Fund's agreement is, in a sense, it's not an absolute kind of sine qua non for unlocking all other funds and so on, but I think it's going to be a very important signal of confidence in the policies of the new administration. Our government has already weighed in very powerfully in support of that happening very quickly, of a successful resumption of negotiations between the government of Ukraine and the International Monetary Fund, and on the basis of a presentation of sound policies that make sense, and on that, the signals we were hearing from our meetings with the new government are encouraging. But I think that we would hope is something that happens, that can happen very soon, that it can happen in a matter of weeks, and that in turn will be an encouraging signal and will actually ensure that a lot of funding from the European Union can flow. But it's not, as I say, the IMF deal is not a sort of absolute kind of nothing happens unless that happens, and you have seen from the statement of European Union heads of state and government that in a sense, the mechanisms of support to the Ukrainian administration those wheels are already being engaged, and that support will be flowing as of now. On the question of gas, I think again this is obviously, as you're aware, it's not a new question, and because it's not a new question, I think that a number of avenues are open. A number of options need to be explored and need to be explored quickly. We've heard about, for example, arrangements to reverse the flows of gas, bring on stream alternative supplies of gas to Ukraine. I think that, again, the question of accelerating the extent to which dependency on Russian gas supplies can be reduced, I think that's something which becomes pretty urgent on the agenda. So quite a range of measures there where I think the new Ukrainian administration can count on the practical support of the energy policymakers of the European Union and its member states.
Please introduce yourself. The next question. I'm Henry Chu with the Los Angeles Times. The EU has said that unless talks between Ukraine and Russia at a high level begin soon, without an actual deadline or any determined date set, that more serious consequences will kick in. Has there been any kind of talk of an actual deadline, and is there any hope that this will actually happen, since Russia has seemed pretty intransigent on this? And then secondly, totally unrelated, is the decision by the Ukrainian government to send out the people who are commonly referred to as oligarchs to the east to try to stabilize the situation there, who are unelected, of course. I mean, do you find that to be a positive development, or do you think that that's a worrisome development?
Okay. You may need to remind me of the second question if I start with the first. What was the first? No. I think that you mentioned, and you will have seen again in the statement of the European Union heads of state and government, that there is very much a sort of phase signalling in terms of the action that the European Union and its member states are prepared to take vis-à-vis the Russian Federation. And you're absolutely right to have noticed in the conclusions of the Council meeting that there were no specific deadlines. But I think if you look at the statement, what is very clear there is to say, okay, we have taken one or two, if you like, one or two signaling measures that say these are a demonstration of our dismay at the actions the Russian Federation has taken. It goes on to talk specifically about asset freezes and visa bans and puts those in a bracket, if you like, of a sort of second phase, and says that if there isn't early action on the part of the Russian Federation to de-escalate, and I think that the important thing here is that is a message that says it isn't just do nothing, it's actually do something. It's do something to improve the situation, something to take the tension out of it. We are looking for action. We are not looking for people sitting on their hands saying, yeah, well, we'll get back to you about this, we'll think about it for a few days or for weeks or whatever. And to come back to your question about the timing, I think it's very clear from the statement of the heads of state and government of the European Union that we are talking here in terms of days and not weeks. Your second question on the appointment of oligarchs to, or so-called oligarchs to, as governors of the regions of Ukraine, in a sense, I can say that's a Ukrainian decision. It has happened entirely within the framework of what Ukrainian decision makers are constitutionally entitled to do. My own feeling, and I think from the context, from the standpoint of what I was talking about in my introductory remarks, of it being very much what the British government wants to see, is a successful project that actually grabs Ukrainians in all regions and convinces them that this is the chance actually to build a successful, strong Ukraine that brings benefits to all Ukrainians. If the appointments of anybody in regional governorships can help to mobilize that effort, can mobilize people swinging behind that effort to build a strong and successful Ukraine, then, as far as I'm concerned, you can appoint anyone who is committed to that project. I think it's in a sense, it's far less important what is the status or what is the background of people and that sort of thing. Again, those are a lot of the questions that I wouldn't presume to lecture my friends, colleagues, counterparts in the Ukrainian administration as to who they should choose and whom they shouldn't choose. What I do think is correct, and what I do think it's right that we, as other neighbouring governments in the European Union, should signal is, as I say, our support for this project of building a strong, unified Ukraine. And if new appointments can help do that, then that seems to me a good thing.
Mr. Ambassador, Michael Hammerschlag, Yahoo News. Do you think this is a fait accompli? I can't see any condition under which Putin will withdraw these troops. He's a very careful guy. He's assessed all the ramifications of this before he ever did it. How long will the EU and the West wait before they invoke sanctions and punishment? And do you think, on your high-level talks, that American battle group in the Black Sea very quickly would have had any influence on his thinking or his actions? And what could you tell us about that, since presumably you're in the know?
Okay, you probably do me. You probably assume far too much about how in the know I am. But no, the serious answer is, again, to come back to the sort of timings of sanctions action and so on. Again, you'll see a lot of evidence for that in the statement that the European Union heads made on Thursday. It is very much and very deliberately at the moment set out as a kind of three-tier or sort of three-phase issue. As I've just said in answer to the earlier question, the second phase is specifically mentioned as, a matter of days, and we are looking for action. We are looking for demonstration from the Russian Federation that they are prepared to engage diplomatically and constructively, and we are looking for evidence that they are prepared to de-escalate the situation, and we're looking for that in a matter of days. Looking beyond that, again, you will see from the statement made by the heads of government, that if there are further actions to destabilize the situation, i.e. it is not just talking about an absence of action. Phase 2, if you like, is an absence of action. It's an absence of positive action taken to de-escalate. Phase 3 is if there is evidence of serious further action to destabilize the situation, and then again, I think it makes every sense that that at this stage the European Union leaders are not spelling out at each point exactly what happens and when, with precise deadlines, and if X doesn't happen by this date, then Y will kick into force and so on. But I think they've laid out very clearly that they are ready to move on to demonstrate, as they have put it, to demonstrate that there are very serious consequences for the relationship, for the ability of the Russian Federation to interact successfully with the European Union, if there are further actions taken to destabilize the situation. I'm not going to speculate further on to say, in a sense, the sense of the first part of your question was to say, okay, what if that doesn't work? We clearly will be thinking very seriously about what happens if it doesn't work. There is no sense in which we're looking at this as a fait accompli. We've made very clear that we regard the action that's been taken as in breach of international law, and we have taken several opportunities to make these views known in the United Nations Security Council, and a large number of fellow Security Council members have made the same point. Again, I'm not going to get into speculation as to what, in terms of military posture, might or might not have made a difference. It is clear at the moment, as I say, that the signaling is signaling from the European Union. I can't speak on behalf of other governments, but it looks pretty similar from the United States as well. The signaling is very much to say there is an opportunity here to get re-engaged positively and constructively on the diplomatic effort. That is a very clear statement that says that's the opportunity that exists now. We are not talking about military options. We are focused on the opportunity there is to re-engage and commit to the diplomatic process, but we are saying very clearly that there will be consequences for a failure to engage in that way.
Vitaly Senko, Ukrainian news agency. As far as I know, United Kingdom sent experts in financial intelligence, money laundering, and tracing criminal assets to Ukraine in order to help Ukrainian government to recover misappropriated assets. Can you give us some more details about this activity? How long are they going to be in Ukraine? And after all, if finally they can find something, what they going to do when those assets come back to Ukraine? Are they going to observe situation how Ukrainian new government using these assets? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I can answer in a sense the first part of your question, because I can absolutely confirm, not least because I met with a very large delegation of men in grey suits yesterday morning at the British Embassy, so I know that these people are in in town. I knew that they would be here quickly because my minister promised when he met Prime Minister Yatsenyuk on Monday that he said we would have an asset recovery task force, as he put it, and he said they will be here within days, and they arrived on Thursday evening, and we're getting to work straight away yesterday. I've seen them, although not to speak to them, but I've certainly seen them this morning as well, so I know they're at work today. So in a sense, that work is very much underway. We have delivered on our first undertaking, which is to send a task force to sit alongside members of the Ukrainian administration to give them expert advice on how this is done, to hear from them and make sure that from them there is a good, thorough approach to the collection of evidence on all this, and then. That, as I say, that is very much a process that's engaged now. The answers to your questions as to what happens next, how long it takes, and so on, that's much more difficult. I couldn't say to you with any degree of accuracy or truth that I will think, this takes so many days, and at the end of that we will find this sort of outcome, and so on. I think that one of the things that our experts will be I'm sure some of the questions that they'll be fielding from members of the Ukrainian administration is precisely to say, look, how is this done? How long does it take? What are the results? And so on. And some of the work they will be doing is actually drawing on experience they've had from other contexts in recent months and years to say, well, this is what we learn from dealing with this sort of situation in country X or country Y. And our experience tells us that it can take quite a long time to follow trails of evidence. To clearly this is an issue that you cannot afford to sort of cut corners with. You can't afford just to say do it in a kind of quick and dirty way, as it were, because all this action has to it has to be solid in terms of its justiciability. It has to be solid in terms of standing up in court. So in a sense, a lot of the questions in the second part of your question are not possible to answer with accuracy. But it is very much one of the points of actually making these experts available, that it clarifies the vision on what needs to be done. It also clarifies what it's reasonable to expect from this process. And all I can say is that clearly I very much hope that is a successful engagement. I very much hope that it can identify some substantial lines of inquiry to pursue, and that those lines of inquiry, when pursued to their ends, will produce good results, and results that are beneficial to the overall quest to recover lost assets.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ambassador, can you...
Sorry, you didn't introduce yourself last time round.
Myself is Nasser from Al Jazeera TV, London office. Can you confirm or deny that the HM Treasury has drawn up plans and names of Russian business people who have large business interests in London to be included in any potential asset freezes and visa restriction?
I can neither confirm nor deny, but I can say that I'm not aware of that process if it's in train at the moment. And I should just add that I'm the ambassador to Ukraine, not to Russia. So, the fact that I don't know that may not be that it's not to be known, but as I say, I simply don't have information on it.
But it wouldn't be surprised to have such a list.
Mr. Ambassador, you talked about three phases. Andriy Zasadnyuk, TV channel, Ukraine. You talked about three phases of prospective British reaction of violation of international laws. What can be the reason, a concrete reason of making the third phase of reaction? Can it be, how can I say that, for example, really formal reaction of Russia to referendum in Crimea, and including Crimea as a part of Russian Federation? Can this be the reason of really a strict reaction of Great Britain? Thank you very much.
I think that, I mean, just to remind you of the words used, and again, this I should stress, this is not just the United Kingdom, it's all the governments of the European Union, but this is certainly an outcome for which the United Kingdom put in a lot of effort on Thursday. It's the outcome we wanted. We wanted the meeting to come out with some strong statements on our preparedness to take action vis-à-vis Russia. And what they said was any further steps by the Russian Federation to destabilize the situation in Ukraine would lead to additional and far-reaching consequences for relations in a broad range of economic areas between the European Union and its member states on the one hand and the Russian Federation on the other. Now, that of course, just reading out that statement doesn't actually answer your question. What it does say is that that is a very careful piece of signaling that says we're not precisely going to define what counts as further destabilization and what doesn't. However, to come back to your question, I think it would be entirely expectable, it would be entirely reasonable to include within the understanding of measures that would destabilize the situation any move to promote a referendum which clearly had no basis and no soundness in law, and to, in a sense, to move forward on those sort of activities by way of sort of creating facts on the ground, attempting to create fait accompli. My understanding, as I say, I'm not interpreting the words. I mean, the words of the European Union leaders are there on record, but they have, as I say, not defined precisely what would be the list of measures that constitute destabilization, but it would be very surprising to find the eventuality that you've mentioned, the fact of proceeding with a referendum, proceeding with actions that have no basis in law. It would be surprising if they were not among that list of envisageable acts of destabilization.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for joining us on Saturday morning or Saturday noon. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.